Welcome to this episode of Unleashed. In the previous episode, we reflected with Sudhir and Dileep how, with a better access to customer, better understanding of the purpose, and with an improved attitude and culture, technology professionals can definitely, while delivering to the predictability and the KPI of the company, could always also add value and innovate with the customer. We reflected on examples of how Dileep has enabled that in his R&D environment, and also he gave an example of how services industry, when owning better outcomes, could deliver higher value to the customer. We also reflected how we as individual professionals are bound by the contracts we make with the society, bound by the contracts we make with your organizations, and how we are responsible to probably push those boundaries at different stages to be more innovative and more value adding in all aspects of our life. In this episode, we will reflect more on how do we institutionalize, or what are the experiences of institutionalizing this access to customer, experiences of institutionalizing this innovation, experiences of adding value and becoming sounding boards to the customer. In this episode, we add a very accomplished professional, Sanjay Salunkhe. Sanjay is the president at Hexaware Technologies and had a very distinguished career of leading engineering teams across multiple companies, delivering value not only to the customers, but ensuring that he is the greatest contributor to the top line and the bottom line of the companies where he worked. Teams he worked with not only delivered the blueprint specified by the customer, but as we reflect in this episode, you would come across instances where they were leading the effort in helping the customers build their blueprints. We begin the episode reflecting with Sanjay more examples of how customer access, understanding the end purpose, helped his teams to deliver extraordinary value to its customers. We also learn from him in this process how he has institutionalized this process of making the teams at all levels to have a better understanding of the customer, a better understanding of the customer end need, and a synchronized effort towards working towards a common purpose.
We were fortunate actually in most cases that our teams, onshore, offshore, wherever they were, had the opportunity of directly connecting with the customers. Customers were very deeply engaged with the clients in most cases. In fact, I had a very strong belief in giving the context to the team of what they are building for. So if it was a medical device product, the team would watch the procedure in live. They would possibly go to a hospital in India, in Bangalore or Pune or Mumbai, and sit through the procedure and see what they do. Because we have seen tremendous gaps there. For example, right, we are designing a laparoscopic stapler for a company in the US. A laparoscopic stapler is for gastrointestinal tracts. Many times in India, a lot of those procedures are gynecological regions, areas of work. The gap would come that there was a product line which US was selling in India and it was not selling well. In fact, the price point was not the reason. The quality was great. But the product would not still sell, and they were not figuring out why is the product not selling. And sometimes it is just the context which you have to get on who is using it. And some team in India then that time figured out that look, most of the gynecologists in India were women, and the stapler was men glove size 8 and above. They couldn't even hold it, so they would go for a local stapler which they could use. Quality was not a problem. Quality was great. The price point was great. You want to use it. But simple things of those kinds, if you don't get a context, your team cannot deliver the value. And I've had that challenges with technologists on throwing jargon rather than actually solving a problem. So that problem-solving setup, critical thinking is very, very important all throughout. And frankly, as leadership, frankly, most of the leaderships teams which we were in, we will go down to every level, the freshers to the mid-level managers, because that's where most services companies mess up, because the middle management starts bloating and loses the context. Correct. And that thinning and that slimming or that area where you challenge your middle management is going to be was very important for us. And we would do that all the time actually. We worked for a mining company, large mining company. People spend times in the mines. As technologies, you are not used to leaving your air conditioned offices in the export processing zones of India. But going then into the mines where the temperatures are 104 degrees, rough conditions, you really then understand the context for what you are building the software for, or what the technology is going to be used for, and so on. And we exposed all the leaders, all the team members from that angle there.
I think that's a practice problem. Takeaways, access to customer, sense of purpose, what is being put to use, absolute must for them to probably maintain this sense of curiosity. Otherwise, they're just writing code somewhere behind.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There are umpteen such examples. In fact, frankly, I remember was where we were doing a port for one of the pacemaker programmers. Yeah, pacemaker needs to be programmed from outside, and it's a very complex programming device with millions of lines of code in it, very well regulated, and so on. And we were changing the operating system on the pacemaker programmer. And we thought that, okay, they are changing because they wanted to bring the BOM cost down. They were moving to a Linux based operating system rather than a proprietary one. Many people would think that, okay, you're going to save with an open source operating system. That company didn't care for cost. And if we would have thought that that was the reason why they were doing it, we would have lost the program completely. We would have messed up the program. It was a multi-year, 10-year program. The challenge was that, in fact, frankly, they were trying to get to an open source operating system so that they could take control on the operating system and strip it down so that the programmer came up to speed very fast. In the sense, the boot up time for the programmer was much faster. The cardiologist is not very comfortable with computing devices. When they press a button, they want to see a screen.
Absolutely.
And if the screen was not coming up fast enough, you're losing the whole context. And that level of questioning, if you don't do, you end up doing projects which don't see the purpose. So the customer connect and the value driven to the client was very critical for us in all those cases.
For every professional, every management, or every leader, I think it's absolutely important that the internal goals of delivering to the KPI is taken care well. It's also very important that all customer commitments are delivered effectively, on time, on budget. And I think that's been the track record of engineering services companies as well as manufacturing companies to deliver predictability both internally and externally. Driving from big picture is very crucial. It's very critical that your business is managed proactively. It is very critical that customer deliverables are managed proactively. Only when I proactively manage these two and ensure that they're all on track, I will have time to work on innovation and value adds. Here is my conversation with Sanjay on how important it is to proactively do upward and peer management. So that leads me to a different question, because I think this gentleman I work with had a strong peer management problem. I think sales versus technology and the upward management problem. In sense, that ability to probably sit back and say, okay, how are my next 3 quarters looking like? Predict before they ask the questions, have a structured upward management, peer management, and therefore is always reacting to demands from different things. So how do we again cultivate in both the capabilities? One is to build that innovation, curiosity, and do these things. At the same time, have this ability to probably run it like a P&L, run it like a business, to anticipate and do it in a more structured way than react to pushes.
That's a great and very important point again, Srinivas, because if you have a culture of an organization which rewards firefighting only, which rewards heroes of firefighters rather than who can bring predictability in the business, that creates a problem there. Then you become a firefighter and you expect fires to be there all the time. You don't run the system that you avoid fires. And that is important. And we talked about that upward management setup is a person should know to avoid a fire what questions we should be asking. Reasonably asking those questions up front, and if you're not getting those answers, escalating them up front, saying that I'm not getting those answers, so I cannot predict this part, and this can cause a fire. And I think if the organization's culture is to douse fires, and reward the firefighters, there's a problem.
Mm.
You have to balance the questions on your side also, that you're asking the KPI questions, you're getting the KPI answers, and you're training them on how to manage their KPIs so that they can spend more time on the curiosity side. The KPI part is not your main job. Getting the KPIs and getting the tactical process parameters in control is important so that you can spend more time on the curiosity side. If you are spending too much time on dousing fires because you don't have any control on your process, you will not get that time to be more curious.
Sanjay summarizes it beautifully, saying only when the KPI are effectively managed will you release time for working on innovation and addressing customer needs. He also very clearly says delivering on KPI, the core of the companies, is not your main job. Your main job is to deliver value to the customer. And I think that's a very, very interesting point he brings up here. This is the earliest step the leader I work with started addressing. He started taking a bigger picture of his business, driving it from larger picture, and proactively started understanding the direction of the business, whether they are meeting the targets, whether what they need to do to meet the targets, and effectively therefore released his time to be addressing more customer innovation issues. I'm going to play a short excerpt of conversation between the leader and his deputy, doing for the first time perhaps proactive management of the targets, proactive management of the margins. We don't play the full except we play only certain samples from that part of the conversation, just to give you the perspective of how he's now proactively managing his business. They were in a smaller conference room at 2:30. The Excel sheet was already on the projector screen. They were new to reviewing progress against current year's plans by themselves. They always depended on finance, sales, or Satya to do the review and tell them how they were progressing. They would have a broad idea of target, but never really took stock of their progress. It was always a post-mortem, largely at the end of the quarter. As they went over the progress so far, they started seeing its many dimensions. They were revenue targets that retail and CPG division was to directly deliver, as well as the targets to achieve through business service groups such as package implementation, testing services, product maintenance, and infrastructure divisions. They looked at the specific targets to improve revenue productivity with fresh eyes. These targets meant the division must now command a better price in the market. The targets for margins were set very high, expecting improved productivity levels. Rakesh realized that he was immersed in the day-to-day struggles and had not internalized the thought behind the strategy. He was only reacting to the pulls and pushes and was not in control of delivering on the plans. As they reviewed the progress against the plans, they realized that service groups were lagging far behind. We need to get the business service groups to deliver on the targets, said Rakesh. Problem is, they expect us to give them opportunities and haven't been planning and driving the targets independently, said Gupta. We should start collaborating with them and get them to make plans, identify the clients that make sense for their service, and work towards meeting the targets. We should invite them to the weekly sales calls and get them to participate actively. Let's set up a call with each of them along with sales. Let's get this moving. Please set up the calls, would you? Rakesh felt a surge of energy. Enthusiasm bubbled within. He felt good about proactively taking steps to manage his business's larger direction. There was a new sense of purpose, yet with a sense of unease. He realized that implementing the actions would have its challenges. They continued with their analysis. Are we covered for this quarter? Asked Rakesh. Can we review the pipeline? They logged into the CRM and reviewed the pipeline. We still have a month in the quarter and are about 20% short of our target. So how are we doing next quarter? How many have we booked already? They analyze the project under execution, the orders on hand, and the pipeline. The figures were alarming. Even if we win some in the pipeline, we only cover about 50% of the next quarter's target. And the support group showed mere 10% contribution to the overall revenue with no opportunity in the pipeline. We now know what to emphasize during the next week's sales call. We must get moving. Rakesh remained seated after Gupta left, reviewing what he must do. He was elated at the new perspective he had gained of his business. He felt confident he could get the support groups to see his perspective. We are now bringing in a very important aspect of structural changes that may be required to institutionalize the process of adding value to the customer. Here are my discussions with Dileep.
I think one of the things that we strongly started looking at is for any of these things to change or happen, some of the strategic things need to change in the organization. The roles need to change from being execution role to strategy roles. You need to bring strategy. You need to bring customer facing roles in the organization. Product management roles need to be here. Not the India product management, the global product management. Who are working directly with the global customers, and they become the immediate connect with the entire developing team. And then it changes the whole game. This year we have targeted to add 20% more global roles in the organization. And every group is trying to look at what can I add. So several product management roles have moved here. There's no other role globally anywhere.
While we are talking about some interesting institutionalized practices of customer access, institutionalized practices of structural changes, Sudhir brings in a very interesting perspective of keeping things which are working well intact. How long does this youngster who's come in with this unleashed ability to really work starts getting leashed by the organization that grows, starts getting leashed by the demands of the financial performance or anything else. So therefore he constrains. And so how long in the journey of a startup, let's say you work so closely with the startup remains that kind of a enthusiastic, like always creative and like being unleashed to full potential, to start getting constrained to being limited by all the impositions on them, whether financially from customers or whatever it is, the kind of, when does it happen? And how are there any good examples of people who stayed through in spite of that kind of a growth?
Good question. I don't know whether there is any sequence in this matter, because I'm not too sure at what point of time do you expect the benefit of this word potential.
Yeah.
See, between potential and potency, or being potent, is a gap. And success or failure apart, you need to also taste potency of effort. And sometimes you have to leash yourself for that. Yeah. And it's at certain points in time that once you've felt the potency and it's working, then I might choose to apply that potency differently. At that point of time, the potency should not be leashing in a context of the same leash was good for a part of the journey, and the same leash is not necessarily good for another part of the journey. And so the unleashing at that point of time is critical. If you want to rethink what is your potential, which you don't have the potency for, and you will build potency for. There's no necessity of a sequence.
Yeah.
It's important to understand what we do not want to change either. Because often there is something that is exquisite. Please don't change it. We don't need, if it's exquisite, I don't need to apply that same concept of be the change you want to see. I don't want to be a change. Lots of good stuff exists. So it's a bit of a battle, I would say. It's like an accordion. Right? There's a certain sound that comes when you press the bellows, when you expand the bellows. But you need to do both.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I agree with you. Because even this change, any change of unleashing is in the context of where you are. And as you rightly said, what is working well. The story of this gentleman I worked with is working well is being predictable. Is working well is delivering. His working well is really putting the whole team to use. But what was not working well is him seeing better value to the customer. What was not working well is to probably being the sounding board to the customer. So in the context, without compromising this, that's a change he made. There are leashes around you.
Yes.
There are leashes, the way the CFO will look at it, the leashes that certain things have to be delivered. There's no change, but they have to work in that context. That's the potential of a lot of talented professionals here. The organizational constraints, the environmental constraints. In spite of that, I think this particular journey of this individual could be that inspiration to people saying, in that context, how do I change? We have to know when to leash, when to unleash, what leashes to hold on to, what leashes not to hold on to. I think that's very important. While during my introduction, I talked about Sanjay, how he led teams which not only delivered to the blueprint, but over a period of time in his latest stints at Capgemini and all, how his team worked with the customer in evolving the blueprint.
I think my experience in those days, the so-called Indian outsourcing setup, we had created our own ceilings around what we want to do and what we do even in the product engineering space. We would say that we are not the consulting company. We are, when your blueprint is ready, we will take the blueprint, but we will deliver the blueprint in the best possible way. We'll show our innovation in that blueprint. What was positively revealing is that a lot of clients loved that help even in blueprinting time, because when they were blueprinting it, it was a tough time for them because there was not much thought from cross industries. Things like how do you really think down the line of supply chain from a product setup itself? How do you think about your employee's journey? How will your dealer deal with that? You might be cannibalizing his business who was doing a part sale or a transaction sale all the time, and suddenly you are moving to an as a service, even in the industrial world. So that holistic view and the connected change management was definitely a positive revealing setup. And again, it comes to the point that do you have time to spend time on that curiosity part of it, of expanding your world beyond solving an engineering problem or a technology problem to the larger business problem. And frankly, many consulting companies, in fact, they were more white collar consulting.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And you need blue collar consulting because eventually you have whatever you conceptualize, it should be viable also.
Yeah.
That viability was bought by our engineering team, saying that okay, this is great to think like this, but you can't
Trade-offs are important. Yeah.
create connections in that. It's like you might think, oh, I want to build a product which I can set up the connect from my car. I'm 45 minutes away from home, and I will turn the microwave on from my car. But the food is not going to walk into your microwave, so you have to think the whole problem through. So that connection was important, and it was a nice complementary model which got put in place.
Not only building the blueprint of the product, but understanding the processes and the workflows beyond the product development to how the product is put to use by different people. What he very aptly terms as blue-collared consulting. There is a strong need for the organization structures to move from pyramid structure to an hourglass structure. Typically, organizations have pyramid models, where the growth is more about how you manage lots of people. As you go to the top, you become more process manager and more capacity manager. In an hourglass model, which is an alternate to this, as you begin the careers, in the initial stages, the people are the doers, they are the solution providers, the solution implementers. As we go in the middle, these are the people who are super specialists, specialists by industry, specialists by technology, specialists by a function. They become specialists. As you grow further, you have to have an ability to manage all these specializations to deliver a solution to the customer. Here are my reflections with Sanjay and Dileep on the middle level professionals and middle level management.
I think forums for all levels to contribute becomes important, and hearing at all levels, because what happens typically in leadership as people go senior is they lose the connect at the ground level. And when I say ground level is the everyday programmer. Even there might be ideas which might be coming out there, and if you create an environment for that, you get some fantastic ideas there, and you also improve your ability to think and understand the DNA of your organization. And democratizing some of this thinking is very important. Like today's world of Gen AI. I feel that most of the innovation will come from the bottom of the pyramid, bottom of the team. It is you can if you don't democratize it, you try to say that oh here is a select few will only talk about it and no one else will do anything about it. It's not going to work, and it has to come from bottoms up. That's where I feel that the bloated middle management is going to be most challenged today. They are not going to touch it, and if you don't force them to use it, it's going to be trouble for many companies.
So we had to completely redesign middle management in one sense.
100%. In fact, frankly, I feel that most IT outsourcing companies, Indian or non-Indian, have a massive bloat which we have created for people managers and process managers. We have elevated them overtly. They have become control points wrongly rather than collaboration points and content points. There's hardly content or collaboration coming out of it, but it's more of control points, and more control points restricts flows actually.
Going back to your hourglass model, if they're told that they're actually going to be probably growing only in an hourglass model, I think that may completely transform them.
Yeah, I think frankly, knowing always opening up the picture of a funnel above them is going to be important for them.
I can tell you one thing I learned about this was when I was in China. And I had taken the role just about a few months before there. I had taken the role because there was a huge challenge in the teams in delivering, in project management, in looking at customers, understanding what needs to be done. And I had 6 managers, fantastic technology people, and they were all considered people managers. Now, this was a concept that people used to feel.
Exactly.
I became a people manager, so that means my job is to take a stick and go around and check. Yeah, get it done. And our CTO came from US during one of the visits, and we had a program reviews and all. They said, "Hey, Dileep, tell me who are your best people in terms of understanding customer, understanding technology. Who are the people who go meet customers and all?" I said, "My managers." And he asked me, "What is the role today?" I said, "People manager." He said, "If these are your best people, these need to be the ones who should be examples in terms of how you deliver products, how you engage with customer, how you design." So he said, "Why don't you make them a project leader as well? Start with them as becoming a project leader. And they need to be responsible for certain technology thing. They need to be known as technology managers, not people managers."
Absolutely.
And I went and talked to all my managers, said, "We wanted to make this change, and you will be looking at delivering technology. And this will be your goal. This is how you will be functioning. And along with this, you will be leading these projects as well." And everyone accepted it. And next 2 years, I think this team became most efficient from a team which was delivering at 40% on time and all that. They became like absolutely delivering quality, engaging with customers, and the whole organization became totally transformed.
Clearly, from both Dileep and Sanjay's discussions, there is a need for relooking at the roles of middle management. I think they need to move away from being just process managers to being technology leaders, inspiring, challenging, and acting best of the solutions, and also contributing to the innovation and value add to the customer. So this episode, we explored the institutionalizing of the innovation, the institutionalizing of delivering on the core, as well as innovating for the customer. We discussed with Sanjay some more examples how he has institutionalized the access to customer, how the understanding of the purpose is so critical, and his examples really illustrated how important it is for the teams here to understand the end purpose and understand the context in which any product or service is put to use. We also discussed with Sanjay how important it is to proactively manage the business, proactively manage the deliverables of the customer. Delivering to those KPI is critical, and not to work on that on a crisis basis. But only when we deliver and manage our business proactively will we release time to work on the customer innovation and adding value to the customer. Sanjay very clearly says also that role of delivering to the KPI is not the primary role. The primary role is to deliver value to the customer. Then we explored the structural changes Dileep is bringing in more product management roles into India. We also explored with Sudhir what to change and what not to change. We finally looked at the changes we need to bring to middle management, how we need to ensure that they move away from being just process managers to being somebody who's inspiring the troops as well as contributing to the customer cause.